I honestly had no idea what these property hooks were and the benefit of them. And yeah, I can see it. Like, I hate it when there's options.
Smarter people do dumb things. We were just talking about that. With PHP got built by smarter people than I, yet there's so much inconsistency. And you look at that and you just go, well, be consistent.
You have to be practical. This is the thing that kind of annoys me, is that developers honestly think that you rebuild every project from scratch.
Welcome to the Code and Character podcast. I'm Bevan. This is Ivan, and we're going to talk about the release of PHP 8.4. What the big thing about PHP 8.4 was the property hooks. They're new. They've just landed on my radar, and I've been looking into those and the history of them. You've been in the same boat, right? They're fairly new to you too, yeah?
Absolutely. When it comes to looking at all of these features, especially these new PHP features, you have to understand that unless you're writing custom code and a lot of PHP custom code, you don't get exposed to it because things kind of take a while to get trickled down to us people that use CMSs, if you know what I mean. So I honestly had no idea what these property hooks were and the benefit of them. And yeah, I can see it. Like I can look at the code and it's like, yep, you define a property and then you can define your hook within it. And the example that I see is defining a getter and a setter. Because I do remember, and I still probably, I was doing this when I would write my own classes and objects and things like that, where you would write a lot of verbose code where you define a property, then you define a getter and setter, and you even have in PHP Storm functions that do that for you, that can generate it for you. Like, it's such a ingrained thing as PHP developers that you define a property. And then, you're sometimes like, wait, is it a private, protected, public? It's like, yeah.
Yep.
But there is a lot of code involved to just define your getter and setters and properties. And now I can really see a benefit of just, you define your property over here and you define your getter and setter. And a lot of the times the getter and setter are literally, it is just returning the property. So I can really see a benefit on that in just streamlining your code and for you not to have to write too much code.
Yeah. The word is reduces boilerplate. Yeah.
That's it. Here. That's it. Reduce.
Make code readable, simple, and avoid boilerplate code.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, totally. The fact that you can, I think it's Command N in PHP Storm on a class, and you can see generate getters and setters. Like PHP Storm is built, not just for that, of course, but it's so ingrained that there are generators specifically for that. So I'm all for reducing code, and just reducing, especially boilerplate code.
Yes. So it is really, this is, like as I said, it's new to me. And though I did go and read I read through this How Did Property Hooks Happen blog. I read through this today. And so you can get access to this on the PHP. So it's funny, this is a really interesting point that I've been doing PHP for 20 years. I just learnt about the PHP Foundation. Mind you, it's only 3 years old, but it's just come on my radar. Of course, I came across it recently and now it's popped up and I'm on this page reading this blog. So you got this blog from Larry Garfield where he talks about how this has been coming since 2009, going through all sorts of iterations of RFCs. And it's interesting how you learn that things like Python, Kotlin, JavaScript do this stuff already, right? Like PHP just got enums. and
why does that not surprise me?
See, there are two models of accessors. In untyped language without visibility controls like JavaScript and Python, accessors are methods with funny syntax. And in typed languages with visibility hooks like C#, Swift, and Kotlin, accessors are enhancements to a defined property, right? And then, so they go on, it goes on to say like that's PHP is one of these, a typed language with visibility controls. So that's the model they followed. One of my favorite things here was that during the iteration, they called it hooks and then they went back and reviewed it, and then they changed it, and then they'd already renamed everything to hooks, and now hooks isn't an appropriate name, but they've renamed it already. I'm like, that's so PHP. They're not hooks, but they're called hooks. They're not.
I love it how I love it how, you know, as Drupal developers, as Drupal experts,
yep,
everything was a hook. And that concept 10 years ago didn't exist outside of Drupal. People would be like, hooks. What are you talking about? Now I feel like in the last 5 years, React has picked it up. All these other platforms has picked up the term hook. And so many times, like, it actually messes in my head because I have, when I hear the word hook, you know, no pun intended, it hooks me, but also I've got the Drupal, the Drupal way in it, you know, in my head, stuck, you know, just stuck in my head. But the term hook is used everywhere, but React does it differently. And I can guarantee some other JavaScript framework is probably doing the same thing. And now
you get it all the time with the English too.
And now they do it. Don't get me wrong. They say the two hardest things in computer science is naming things and cache invalidation. I mean, that is so true. That is absolutely that's so true.
I mean, I actually kind of see the Drupal style of what a hook is fitting in here, right? You've got a property. You've got, when you access the property, this code runs. You've hooked into the property. It kind of makes sense. But you read through this, you know, he goes in here somewhere. If we search for hook, maybe I can find where he says it. Don't want to spend too much time.
But that's the interesting thing.
Search for renaming.
And we have touched on it before in the past on this esteemed podcast. And by the way, if you guys want to watch any of our previous episodes, check out our YouTube channel. There you go, free plug. But it comes down to
and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. You need to put a little ding in here. I know. I need to actually create a hotkey that dings it. But this is where it comes down to communication, because imagine when you're building a website, the technology means nothing. It is communicating what you are building with the client is the most important thing. And this is the same. It's like, what do you call something before it's even built and you give it a name? I can kind of see that. Yeah, they started calling it hooks and they were always like, well, let's call it something else. Let's call it something else. And then you're just kind of stuck. And I can kind of see like, oh, well, we don't know what we're going to call it. And then, you know, just kind of stuck. It's not the best name. But that just shows like programming languages are so, well, they change, they iterate. Yeah. They're never perfect.
That does make me laugh. I'm going to read it out now. We can bring it up in post editing if we need to. But of course, this is also when we changed the name from accessors to hooks, which seemed a more accurate description given that model. This later ended up not making sense, but Elia had already taken the time to rename everything in the patch, so it was too much work to change it back. Sorry.
You should be able to get AI to change it. Come on, man. I'm saying AI.
It's just so PHP. PHP's always had and didn't they work on fixing this where you always had like two different functions that do similar things and their parameters were swapped, so you could never. You've got array search and array merge had their properties in different orders and stuff.
That's right. They had some doozies, or they would use the number 2 for like 2. Like I remember in certain functions, I would use numbers in them, and they did kind of there was all sorts of stuff.
I think they've worked on resolving those over the years. But see, this is funny. Things happen, and you just kind of move on and you learn things, because this is like really speaking about learning this is it's not very low level, it's OOP, it's very OOP centric. You know, I've been doing PHP since 2000. It's like 24 years, and so it was a procedural language back then, and I always wanted to learn OOP, and then slowly over the years it slowly added it in there, and then you know, and that the irony that everyone's moving away from OOP so old school, and you're like, it's new. Relatively.
OOP is old school, but yet everyone's using TypeScript.
Yeah, I know. But everyone wants to do functional programming now, and then like that's the funny thing when I look at OOP done properly. I'm like, isn't that just pretty much functional programming? Everything should be a function, and every function should be discrete. And you go, yeah, that's solid principles in OOP. I don't really understand the difference. Someone will come in and go, clearly there's obviously a difference. I'm like, obviously there is, but they're kind of the same idea.
I mean, I always say, and this is why I don't get into politics when it comes to even stuff in open source projects and all that. I know there are smarter people making decisions, and you can never have the perfect platform. To even think you can have the perfect platform, Drupal sucks because of this. Okay, show me the best platform that you can build. Okay, unless you build it from scratch. No system is perfect.
Yeah.
I know there are smarter people that are doing it, and just tell me which way to do it. Just don't give me options. I hate it. I hate it when there's options.
Smarter people do dumb things. We just talk about that with when PHP got built. PHP got built by smarter people than I, yet there's so much inconsistency. And you look at that and you just go, well, be consistent, right? And then, I get it with some of the Drupal stuff too, though. Sometimes you see an issue that's in there and you've got this issue, you've got a patch, and someone comes in and they go, this patch won't work and they say a bunch of stuff you don't understand. And you're like,
okay,
that looks like gibberish to me. Like, are they smarter or are they just a different,
But you're thinking it from you're assuming that everyone sits down and creates the language in one go. These things iterate over time. So you have all these functions that slowly get added over the years. And you have to you have to be practical. This is the thing that kind of annoys me, is that developers honestly think that you rebuild every project from scratch. You have to start everything from scratch. You can't. You iterate over time, and you just have to be practical. You have to understand, okay, this function was built 10 years ago or something. Let's just say that. It was a terrible function name. The signatures were wrong, and somebody approved it at like midnight, forgot about it. It's been in the code base for like 20 years. Now to change it, what's going to happen? Exactly. So it's kind of like,
it's hard to change. Yeah,
it's hard to change, and that's the thing. It's like every single programming language has this, and it's up to us. I want to call it us carbon, meatheads, brains, because at the end of the day, what was it? Battlestar Galactica? They're called toasters or something. The robots, but you can always have some type of like linting system fix that problem up for you.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. You just have to understand.
It's an interesting point. When you call it, what do we call it? Because I kind of over the years as a web developer eventually started to see myself as a tradesman. Right.
Yeah,
we call ourselves engineers, right? But I'm not the kind of software engineer who builds and writes a programming language in C and designs PHP. I take PHP and I build a website out of it. In fact, I don't take PHP and build a website out of it. I take Drupal that somebody else built and I interact with that. And it's like putting bricks together. So I'm a mechanic, not an engineer who designs fuel injection systems, like that's a very different. And I think our industry misses that sometimes. I think so many people go, engineers. Is a mechanic an engineer or is a mechanic a mechanic? Right.
That's yeah. I don't know. Like that's an interesting one because you think about it. A mechanic, unless they are, that is an interesting one because it comes down to the components. A mechanic generally doesn't build the components from scratch. They could, absolutely. They can machine them.
Fabricate
and they do,
piece,
exactly. They do fabricate them. And in the future, you're going to have, and I'm sure now you have 3D printed stuff. You can just 3D print, but then the machine's doing that. And then the mechanic just places it all together. Now, I don't want to say anything bad against mechanics. They're great at what they do, but just to kind of differentiate between, are they actually engineering a nut or a bolt that can withstand, certain amount of, temperature. But the thing is though, when you come from site building standpoint, I don't want to say site building, but we do sometimes build custom components. We do sometimes have to engineer custom components on any type of website. And yes, we use Drupal for 90% of it. We build it out, and then there's always
Yeah, and often
one bit.
patching bugs in Drupal is a very common thing to do.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, there's a grey area, right, between
it's
engineering.
grey,
It's a spectrum. But yeah, because there's areas where a mechanic does engineering stuff.
Yes.
But they're not necessarily an engineer. And there's times when an engineer might do, probably happens less. The more further down the engineer path you go, the less mechanics you do. But mechanics tend to do a little bit of engineering. Yeah. I think that's probably how it works. And we're probably a bit the same. Like I've made the argument, I think web developers, what do you got a computer science degree for? To be a web developer, go to TAFE, learn what control structures are, and off you go, right?
Well, that comes down to work, and people just want to build great websites.
Yeah, and then here we are today with that. We've gone so off this PHP stuff, but we're talking PHP property hooks, and sort of this is the interesting point, because I've brought this up in this podcast before, that I tend to have become a specialist over the years. I became a specialist in PHP. Of course, I used to code in ASP before it was .NET. Cold Fusion, I just picked those up on the job. They go, here, this is what we're using. I picked them up. PHP came out. I loved the function reference. I'm like, cool, a function reference, great. I learned PHP in 10 minutes. Like, what are the controls? What's the basic syntax? Off we go. We're building a site in PHP. Never looked back, and then eventually heard about CMSs over the years. Didn't really understand what they were until I finally got a job doing Drupal. And it's like, oh, now I get it. That's what a CMS is. Eventually learned Drupal, and now I'm a specialist in Drupal. I don't fully understand WordPress, though I did a big deep dive into their governance and stuff, but I don't know it from a technical perspective. You put me in front of a WordPress website, I'm going to be going, it's a pile of, like, I've got a big learning curve. And then you hear things like this, these property hooks, and then you read that they've been in Kotlin and JavaScript, and they're an object-oriented thing that's common in lots of other languages that I don't learn. And that's probably why there's a lot of people give the advice of, it's important to learn a bunch of other languages. I've had a lot of people say that, and I'm like, yeah, but when you're in your job and you're working 8 hours a day and you're exhausted, the last thing you want to do is sit down and play with computers when you get home. And I spent all day solving PHP problems. I've never, it's a few times at work I put my hand up and gone, there is a couple of times I wrote a thing in Python to dial my phone once. Do I know, I've brought this up before, do I know Python? Kind of. I'm a lot more comfortable in PHP. It's a path of least resistance. If I can solve it in PHP, I'll solve it in PHP first, because it's just more comfortable.
That's your tool of choice.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And not because it's necessarily better. It's because it's what I know. And then, but it's just interesting, these property hooks, that they've been around, and you kind of hear PHP's been wanting them since 2009. And I've just learned about what they are now that they're out. And so it's an interesting what you learn, right? And then they're going to show up in Drupal in 12 months' time. They'll be everywhere, maybe even sooner. Some of these things tend to, because we just got object-oriented hooks in Drupal. Speaking of hooks,
yes, the hooks are finally. I'm gonna have a moment where I need to celebrate hooks, because that plays such an important part for me. And I actually posted about, I think I posted this on LinkedIn once, that for me when I learned Drupal back in the day, you could go to api.drupal.org and just search for function names, and then you'd be like, okay, how do I save a node? I just type in node _ and then you see all of these function names. Oh, I was able to discover these functions very quickly. Now with like services and all that type of stuff, it's hard to find out, which service do I use for saving path.
And there's not a lookup on Drupal.org. There's not an easy way to look that up. Like, there literally used to be a search box. You type in it, you type node, and it just filled in with all these functions with the word node in it. Node insert, node update, node blah, blah, blah. List of all the hooks. Yeah, and now you got the services. And even now, every time I need to find a service, you either Google it and you find an example that does it, or you Google what drush command goes, because I don't think there's a built-in drush command. there's a drush command, and you run drush script and run some script, and it's like, and you do them so rarely. It's like once every few weeks you need to look up a service, and I can't remember what that bloody code was, right? It's kind of.
I recently was dealing with, speaking about deprecated stuff. It was JavaScript, okay? I needed to set a cookie in a behavior. All right. I'm like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
I Google things and I see Google brings up the fact that there is jQuery cookie or something. All right, cool. I find out that jQuery cookie has been deprecated, no longer used.
Yeah.
Okay. Then they moved over to a non-jQuery one that doesn't have a dependency on jQuery called like JS cookie. Great. Fiddling around, mucking around there, wondering, why isn't this loading up? Then I find out that has been fully removed from Drupal as well. So it's kind of like, and this has happened so many times where I Google things, Google brings up like the version 8 of the API. So because now with api.drupal.org, every single maintenance release has its own page. So all of that gets, so like 8.1, 8.9 seems to have been stuck in Google's index. So everything is like 8.9.
Yeah, it's this part of the shitification of Google as well.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's funny. And it's like, I Google these things. I find out how to use this function. I chuck it into PHP Storm. PHP Storm then crosses it out and tells me it's deprecated. Then I look and see that it's been deprecated. So it's like I need to go through these like 3 or 4 iterations. It's like, so what is the actual service?
Yeah, you solve the same problem 5 different ways before you get the one that works.
Exactly. Then I find out that you need to use a service called path auto something manager negotiator. And it's like, okay. That was well named. Okay, cool. Yeah. I grab that and then I finally get there.
Yeah. And you find ChatGPT suffers that same issue.
Oh, ChatGPT is
trained on that same data.
It's not
it's
not
got
perfect.
Better now. It's got web in it, but that's it's doing the exact same thing. People are stupid ChatGPT, but you're like, it's doing the exact same thing that happens to me, right? Obviously, it makes the same mistakes I make, and you go. And I've always wondered that these mistakes I keep making, I can't be the only one that's making them. And they'll go into ChatGPT, how do you do this? And it goes like that. And you go, that's how I would have done it too. Yeah. But that's not how you do it.
Exactly. Exactly. And you can see why. And you can see why everyone is using AI to develop JavaScript-based apps, because there's so much more data out there. There's so much more actual training data for the LLMs to train off. Of course, it's going to pick that stuff up. You know, no one writes about Drupal these days. I don't know.
No, but it's all out there. But it's really
like it's popular.
Yeah, I think Google has got bad, because I remember when you went from like Drupal 6 to 7, right? You just type Drupal 7 and you get your Drupal 7 API answer. Nowadays, you type Drupal, and Drupal 7's. Like Drupal 8 came out in 2018, I think, which is literally 6 years ago. Yeah, and then you still got to tell Drupal, no Drupal. Like there's still Stack Overflow answers that are Drupal 7 answers that are like 6 years old, and you're just like, it's just, you got to filter through that. I found that it got harder and harder over the years. Mind you, the code got, I don't know, they've changed so much, like the API in 8 and even now. Well, we'll see. It hasn't changed so much since 8 came out. We've gone 9, 10, and it's changed in subtle ways, not like it did from 7 to 8 was a massive change. But we've gone more and more.
Sorry. When did you say Drupal 8.0.0? Let me do that again.
I said 2018.
No. 19th of November 2015. That means
no,
it's 2015. Yes, that was when the actual release node was created. So 8.0.0.
But I still remember
the release node was created
in Darling Harbour on the water at a Drupal 8 release party like it was yesterday.
That's right. It was at James Squires, wasn't it? Like it was at James Squires hotel, like the pub at Yeah, Darling Harbour. Well, it's not Darling Harbour. It was
it's a James Squire pub where we used to.
Yeah.
When you worked in the city, that's where you went because it was nice and it
Yes,
had
I
some
was
beer.
working in the city then, and it was a
Yeah.
hot day. It was end of November, of course. Like Sydney, well, I think Sydney just recently had like 37-degree day already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa, that's actually full on, because that means that it will be
That's 10 years.
9 years. It will be 10 years next year. And see, this is the thing.
Round
It's like
up.
it's like
Rounding error. Rounding up.
well, 10. Like I remember. Oh, I feel old, man. I'm kind of having a moment when I listen to my old music, my old Offspring music, and I realize when that album was, The Offspring, when it was actually released, and it's like,
yeah,
Jesus, this was released 30 years ago. It's like, oh my God. But no, I remember when last time I was living in Europe, it was like Drupal 8 is going to be out soon in 2013, but
Drupal 8 still feels new, right? And
but the thing is, though,
coming up on 10 years.
I know we've gone totally off topic, but the thing is, it was easy to search for how the difference between Drupal 6 and Drupal 7, because Drupal 7 was Drupal 7. Okay, it was so, and what I mean by that is we never came up with a good name for Drupal 8, which was, in my opinion, a brand new product. So it was a full rewrite. I would say it start from scratch. It essentially was that, a full rewrite, a full architectural paradigm shift. And I always like to say, this is in my live streams. I often say this module was recommended in Drupal 7 and below, and now if you want to implement the same functionality in Drupal 8, 9, 10, 11, or Drupal X, or the latest version of Drupal, then you need to do it this way. So it's always been a
it became a different product.
Yeah,
it's still got content types, blocks, views,
but architecturally it's totally different. Like all the modules had to be rewritten, and I do hope that with Drupal Starshot, now it's Drupal CMS. Hopefully,
you were just talking about that.
Yeah, hopefully just naming things. Exactly. Naming things is so important from a marketing standpoint.
I think you might disagree with me. I don't like that they called it Drupal CMS. Starshot was great, because I saw something happen before the Starshot, around about the same time the Starshot initiative came out. There was a guy put up an issue queue, I think we need to rename Drupal for the exact reasons you just came up, right? That because the clients don't care about the version, they just care that they're on Drupal. Right. So, and that's the good point. The Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 was effectively a different product, but the client doesn't know. When you go Drupal 9's out, they don't care. He goes, we need to come up with a name that defines that. And then the Starshot initiative came out, and sort of, if I remember that issue correctly, and I might be wrong, there was kind of a consensus to go, why don't we start calling it Drupal CMS? They go, cool, that's a good idea. Then Starshot came out, so now we've got Drupal and Drupal CMS, and you're like, why'd you call them basically the same thing? Like, kind of Starshot was great because it differentiated it so much, and it was. How many things get called stuff that don't make sense, right? You go and use, just open clip. It's got the word clip in it, but how many, like Kotlin? What's Kotlin mean? I don't know. It's Kotlin. It doesn't need to be. And then you go Drupal CMS because it's Drupal and it's a CMS. And you're like, yeah, but now you got two things called Drupal. I didn't really like that they went from, I thought Starshot was good because it differentiated. It doesn't sound anything like Drupal. And I've kind of gone, you're going to go talking to the clients now, and you're going to go, there's going to be so many people that aren't going to, like, people don't understand the difference between Java and JavaScript to this day. There's people that don't understand the difference, right? We've got to make the exact same thing, right?
I seriously had a manager that was like, JavaScript, the same thing. And then this was like, no. And he was saying, oh yeah, we're going to write this in Java. I'm like, really? You mean JavaScript? Oh yeah, JavaScript, same thing, right? No. Yeah. And we kept telling him that. It's like, you need to, kind of like my little pet peeve when people are like, where I ask them, what's the actual domain name? Oh, it's .com or .com.au. I'm like, they're two very different things. What is it? I don't know. Oh, just try .com. So, no, that's my developer brain. No, 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 no. If you buy a .com.au, you need to, be a registered company. You're going to be charged a lot more. Two very different things.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So you've said it a few times. The two hard problems. Then the first one, naming things.
absolutely.
And most of my career, the amount of people but a number of people use that as an excuse to not name things well, and it gave me that. You go, what's this name? You got to remember naming things is hard. And I go, that's why you should do it that's why you should put some effort into it. Not just go, I'm just not going to care about naming it. Then you go, now you've made the problem even worse, right?
You don't understand how much I procrastinate if I can't name things, like the internal, the I don't want to say trauma because it's a loaded word, but sometimes simple things like a field name, should it be pluralized or not? And it's like, but what if it is? What if when you allow one value, the cardinality on the field is unlimited or 1 or 2. Should it be pluralized? Shouldn't it be pluralized? What happens if the client changes their mind, 6 months? Should it be? And then Drupal actually limits the length of the machine name. And then sometimes you're like, you just hit that limit and the S is dropped. And it's like, no.
So then you want to remove the field prefix off all your fields, so you've got an extra 5
Then he stuffs it up, and then you have one field that doesn't have the content type prefix. Exactly. And that just eats you up inside. And then when you're writing custom code 6 months down, you're like, why isn't this code working? Oh, that's right. This one field doesn't have the prefix, and I thought it was this field name.
Yes. When we were at Drupal South Hobart, Simon Hobbs did a talk about, what was it called? Content modeling, where he did a lot of talk about naming things, and I've never quite learnt it. Right, I remember watching him, and because he had a number of principles to follow, if you put it that way. I remember it's be on YouTube for the Drupal South Hobart.
Yeah, he's talked about. He's done a few presentations on that.
Yeah, he's very good at that stuff.
Yeah, he is.
And
absolutely.
And so you're making me want to go and watch that again. I've watched that before. It's one of those things you watch it, and you go, "That's so great," and then you probably forget it all because it's something you need to embrace, I think. But this naming things is hard, and that's now we've got all this because they're called property hooks, and they reckon they're named bad. I don't think they're named so bad at all. They look, as I understand hooks from Drupal, they seem to work that way. And then you can go and read up. There's this other thing called asymmetric visibility. How's that for a name? That ties into these property hooks. Asymmetric visibility. It's like you can see both ways. Is that what asymmetric means? No, hang on. It looks different from two. I don't know. Asymmetry means it's different on two different sides. With the word visibility, it doesn't. See, that doesn't automatically carry across the meaning, but it probably does to somebody that knows what it means.
Well, yeah, but I have no idea what that actually means.
Yeah, it's
I did see.
I read it today. It's just it's in the property hooks documentation. There is a component of it, and I think it did actually come out as part of the property hooks. If you guys watching, you want to go read about property hooks and asymmetric visibility, but this is one of the other things that happens in the way we learn things, because I'm reading this from the PHP Foundation's news. Right, and so it's like the big news: 8.4 got released. It's got property hooks, and you're like, "The fuck's a property hook?" Right? And then you go and read it, and then you find out that property hooks have been around for 15 years, and in other languages they're already around. And you're like, it'd be really nice if the news was more, we're working on, and I can understand why they don't, right? But that kind of news, because now I know that since there was an RFC about it in 2009, another one in 2013, another one in like whatever they were, and now we've got it, and I'm only learning about it now, and it's kind of interesting because we've got enums in 8.3, which was a year ago. See, that's an interesting point. The enums came out, and I've kind of been sitting on those for years because I was aware of what enums were from dabbling in learning C 25 years ago, and now we got them in PHP 12 months ago, and I haven't seen I haven't seen those show up in any code I've seen yet in Drupal. I think they're probably getting used somewhere, but it's like straight away you want to use it because you want to learn it. Yeah, we've got enums. How do I use enums? And then you just use them badly, and the property hooks are I think a few people are worried about that too, that there's going to be a bunch of people just using property hooks in bad ways. And of course, they're so new, they might have implementation issues that we won't find out about until they're in the real world. And that's Drupal CMS is going to have the same problem when that launches in January. So, whew.
Yeah, lots of fun.
Yeah, I think we should wrap it up, Ivan.
I think so.
We call it
Yes.
property hooks.
Property hooks,
Check 'em out.
yeah, exactly. And if there's any other fun 8.4 things we should look at, leave us a comment.
Or anything else you want to speak about, tell me
Yes.
I'm wrong and I'm stupid. Or what else did we brought up? Drupal. Anyway, we were going to wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. People have left anyway.
Yes.
Cheers.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.